Hi everybody, welcome to another video. This is one of our little comparison ones we're going to do while we've got these two tanks that are exactly the same. So this one is the ANI F160 and the Devilbiss SGK 600BV, which is what it's called in the States and the Americas and things like that. FLG5 is what it's called in Europe. So for those that watch the channel, they'll realise that the FLG5 was originally mine, and I've since sold it, but I've lent it back, and the guy who's got it has got a 1.3 tip, so I thought, well, that would be a good time to compare it to the F160, because I've got an F160 that I use for primer, this one, but I've got a tip set in 1.3 for it. So I've got it in 1.3 and 1.8 basically. So I thought it'd be a good idea to put the two together while I still had the FLG5. So it's 1.3 v 1.3, so everything should be more or less the same. So that was the idea of it. So we'll start off with the first gun up is the F160. Now I've tried to keep this as I've put the settings on the guns just coming up, so you'll see what settings they are, but I've tried to keep this as fair as possible, if that makes sense. In my head I know which gun I prefer out of these two now, having used them, well, the FLG5 I've used for ages, and having used this a few times, I know which one I prefer. But this is the first time I've actually used them in 1.3, both of them in 1.3. So it's interesting for me to see, as I'm hoping it is for other people. So with no bias, I tried to keep everything, as I was saying, everything as neutral as possible. So it's exactly the same day, same conditions. There's a couple of little bits get in the work, which is inevitable really, because I'm carrying around the workshop, and it's not the best thing to do. You should really paint something and leave it, but you know, to swap them round you need to carry them around when they're wet, etc. So but they've come out pretty good, to be fair. So you'll see that I'm, you know, doing the normal stuff. We're forgetting the underneath of the tank. So you know, if anybody's saying, oh, you're not doing a proper job, then I'm not, as far as underneath goes, because as I say, these are project tanks, so these two are going to be sprayed different colours, different lacquers, different guns, and I wanted to have two exactly the same so that we could compare them afterwards with a better quality camera. Down to the temperature, you see I'm doing the temperature is exactly the same, well, within a degree, in a degree Celsius or so. The actual weather is about 9 degrees Celsius, which is about 48, something like that, Fahrenheit. So I'm heating the tanks up to about 22, 23 as best I can. That's Celsius, which is about 70, 74 Fahrenheit, 75 Fahrenheit, something like that. So I'm just trying to get, as I say, everything as even as possible. Now the clear coat is put into the cup and heated, then put into the cup. And again, I use the gun to try and get the clear coat at about 25 Celsius, about the same temperature each time. So each time the cup is replenished with new 25 degree clear coat. So I've made it I think I've made it as even as I possibly can, so that everything is exactly the same. So let's get on to the guns then, shall we, before I bore everybody to tears. So start off with the FLG5, which is what you can see here. I had this gun for ages and ages, and it's a really, really good gun, really well made, for the price point anyway. Well made, it's going to be reliable. I've never had any problems with it. The only thing I've had to change, which when it was a 1.8 tip, but it would be the same regardless of what tip size it is, the only thing I've had to change is the small sealing ring, which is behind the actual nozzle. When you screw the nozzle in, there's a small sealing ring, like there is with a lot of lot of guns. The F160 is the same. There's a small sealing ring behind there. You can buy them as a packet of 5. I can't remember the price now, but they're about £6, which is about 10 US at the moment. So they're not expensive, and that's the only thing I've had to change. I'm not a professional painter, so I'm not using them all the time, although I do a reasonable amount, so it gets a fair bit of use. Otherwise it's reliable, and I would expect it to be completely reliable as well. What you also notice is the size of the fan compared to the F160. They're both on full fan, and the FLG5, or the 600 as you call it in the States, has definitely got a smaller fan. As I say, the fan's on full, so it's not a question of opening it up. It's completely on full. I put the settings on the guns. I think first on both of them was 2 turns out on fluid, and second on both of them was about 3 turns out on fluid. But I've put in writing, you'll see it come up on the at the start, the actual settings I used. But you'll notice, as I say, the fan is smaller, and there seems to be less fluid coming out of it as well, which is, as I say, it's 1.3, but sometimes you get that. Maybe one manufacturer's 1.3 isn't quite the same as the other. But you'll see, if you look back on this video and you see the amount of time it takes me to paint with one to the other, one is about 25% faster, and that's the F160, and that's purely because the fan's bigger, and it seems like a little bit more fluid is coming out, but most of it is the fan size, so it makes it quicker and easier to paint things like this. Now of course a big fan isn't always a good idea. If you're doing smaller work, then maybe you want a smaller fan, so I would say the FLG5 may be more suited if you're doing smaller stuff, or if you're doing part stuff, you know, doing repairs on doors and bumpers, fenders as you say, things like that. Maybe the FLG5 would be better for you than the F160, because the F160, as I say, with a bigger fan, when you turn the fan in, there's not so much control on the fan as there is with the more expensive guns. Neither of these have got a particularly controllable fan, if that makes sense. So there's not a huge range between spot and full, if that makes sense. So I try and use, I think a gun atomizes better when it's on full fan. So I try and use most of them at full fan if I can. It's pointless if you're doing a push bike frame and you've got a 12-inch fan. It's pointless, but you would use, well, I would use something smaller normally. So as I say, well made, very good gun, but for me in this test the F160 came out better. Now as I say, you've got, this is what I meant about walking around the workshop with them to when they're wet. It's not ideal. So when you see the higher quality pictures, you'll see a couple of little nibs in there, which obviously you can polish out without much problem. But for me, the F160, take away the fact that it's not going to be as reliable, I think it gives a better, well, I think it gives a better finish. You can make your own mind up. I've labelled, as I say, high quality camera at the end, and I've labelled the two up so that you can see which one did which. But I think the F160 came out better. It certainly felt better to use, and that's like quite hard for me to say, because I don't know, what, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, if anybody said to me a good quality gun in the £100, 140, 150 US dollar range, I'd have said the FLG5 all day, but now I would say the F160, because it just seems to be, I just really enjoy painting with it. Maybe it just suits me. Pressure's the same on both of these. It's recommended pressure, which seems to work fine. You know, you maybe could go up a little, down a little. The FLG5, I find that you can go up a little bit more with pressure if you want to, for a little bit of a flatter finish, but you can with the F160 as well. So I thought I'd leave them at recommended pressures, because I thought that would probably be a fairer way of doing it. But you can see here the F160 really slaps it on, and it's just a really enjoyable gun to use. You can see that the fan is lovely. For this sort of price point, I think it's a really good gun for you. So apologies to all the FLG5 fans. I think you've been pipped at the post by this one, because it really does seem to get, in my opinion anyway, gives a better finish and is better to use as well. So I've got a little tag where the tank would mount by the seat. I've got a little tag so that I can tell the difference between the two. So this is the ANI F160. I mean, it's a very good finish. Bear in mind that it's a sanded clear coat, so it should be a reasonably flat finish. No tag. With the tag, that little tag there, is the FLG5, and it's probably hard to see on the camera that there is a difference, and by difference I mean a flatter finish, which isn't of course what you always want, but you can dial them in to give you a less flat finish anyway. So that's both the same for both of them. So yeah, I mean, I think that the F160 came out tops. It's quite close, but I do think it came out tops. So that's from me. That's the win for the F160. But the FLG5 is a really good gun, and I think it would probably last longer. It just looks not better made, but less complicated made. So anyway, hope you enjoyed it all, guys, and thanks for watching. Cheers. Thank you. Bye bye.